The call came at 2:47 in the morning. I was alone in the observation lab at NASA's Johnson Space Center, nursing my third coffee of the night and trying to stay awake through another shift of monitoring deep space telescope arrays. 12 years of education, a doctorate in exobiology, and I was essentially a highly educated security guard watching screens that never showed anything interesting. Then every alarm in the facility started screaming at once. My coffee hit the floor. The main display was hemorrhaging data, numbers cascading faster than I could process. The deep field array, the one pointed at an empty region 40 light years from Earth, was registering something impossible. Not just a planet, a signal, a reflection. I ran through the diagnostics 3 times. The equipment wasn't malfunctioning. There was something there. Something that hadn't been there 6 hours ago when the previous shift signed off. By the time Director Pemberton arrived 20 minutes later, I'd already pulled the initial imaging data. She looked over my shoulder at the screen, her face going pale in the blue light of the monitors. "That's not possible," she whispered. But it was, right there on the screen, clear as anything. A planet, Earth-sized, Earth-identical. Same atmospheric composition, same ratio of land to water. And when we enhanced the surface imaging, something that shouldn't have been possible from 40 light years away. But the readings were impossibly clear. We could see continents, familiar shapes, North America, Europe, Asia. "Someone call the director of NASA," Pemberton said, her voice hollow. "Call everyone. We just found another Earth." We designated it Secundus. Within 72 hours, every space agency on the planet was involved. The images kept coming, each one more detailed than should have been possible, as if the planet wanted us to see it. And what we saw made no sense. The continents were right, the oceans were right, but everything else was wrong. I spent 3 days in the imaging lab, zooming in on different regions, trying to understand what I was seeing. There were forests, but the trees grew in spiral patterns, their trunks corkscrewing toward the sky. There were animals. I could see herds moving across plains that looked like the Serengeti. But they were wrong. A creature that resembled an elephant had 6 legs and a trunk that split into 3 separate appendages. Birds flew in formations above what looked like the Amazon, but each one had 4 wings arranged in an X pattern. "It's like evolution took a different path," Raymond Park said, looking over my shoulder. The geologist had been pulled into our analysis team. Everything that developed on our Earth developed there too, but the solutions were different. "Not just different," I said, zooming in on an ocean scene. Something breached the surface, whale-like, but with too many fins arranged in geometric precision along its body. Wrong. Like evolution, that doesn't optimize for efficiency. It optimizes for redundancy. "Backup systems," Hassan Okonkwo added. The medical officer had joined us an hour ago. "Multiple organs, additional limbs. From an evolutionary standpoint, it's actually not a bad strategy. More redundant systems mean better survival odds." "Then why didn't it happen here?" I asked. Nobody had an answer. The cities were worse. They appeared in the satellite imagery on day 4. Settlements scattered across the continents, following coastlines and rivers just like on Earth. But the architecture was organic, curved, as if the buildings had been grown rather than built. and they looked empty. No lights at night, no movement, just vacant structures that made my skin crawl, even through the telescopic images. The announcement came on day 7. The World Space Agencies had pooled resources to fund something that had been in secret development for 3 years, a faster-than-light vessel using quantum fold drive technology. It could make the journey to Secundus in 6 months. They were assembling a crew, and I was on the list. "You're our best exobiologist under 40, Director Pemberton told me in her office. "You've spent the last week studying this planet more than anyone. We need you." "When do we leave?" I asked. 3 weeks. I should have said no. I should have felt the wrongness in my gut and walked away. But I was 34 years old, and someone was handing me the opportunity of a lifetime, a chance to set foot on another Earth, to see alien life with my own eyes. I said yes. The Compass Rose launched from Cape Canaveral on a cold morning in December. 10 of us strapped into acceleration couches as the quantum drive powered up with a sound like reality tearing. Captain Lisa Thorne, former Air Force pilot and mission commander, counted down from 10. At 0, the universe folded. I can't describe what faster-than-light travel feels like. The best I can manage is, imagine being turned inside out, but only temporarily. We were in Earth orbit, and then we were in the space between stars. And the transition took both an instant and forever. 6 months subjective time. That's how long the journey would take. 6 months in a ship the size of a small house with 9 other people, hurtling toward a planet that looked like home, but felt like a nightmare. The crew was small but diverse. Captain Thorne ran the ship with military efficiency, but genuine warmth. Raymond Park, the geologist, kept us entertained with increasingly elaborate theories about Secundus's formation. Claire Vega, our atmospheric scientist, was quiet but brilliant. Hassan became my closest friend during the journey, the 2 of us spending long hours in the observation deck, watching the stars. The images from Earth kept coming, relayed through quantum communication. They got worse. 2 months into the journey, the telescopes captured footage of one of the coastal settlements. Something was moving through the streets. The resolution wasn't perfect, but we could see figures, humanoid, walking on 2 legs. But even in the grainy footage, something about their proportions was wrong. They moved with too much grace. Their arms seemed too long. "They're still there," Claire said, staring at the screen. "The inhabitants. They didn't go extinct." "Are they human?" Raymond asked. Nobody answered. 4 months in, Hassan found something in the enhanced imagery that made him call an emergency meeting. He projected an image on the observation deck screen, a close-up of one of the spiral forests. Between the trees, barely visible, were structures, not buildings, sculptures maybe, carved from wood or bone. It was impossible to tell, depicting figures in various poses. The figures had too many limbs, 4 arms, 6 arms, arranged symmetrically on torsos that looked almost human. The faces were the worst part, almost right, eyes in the wrong positions, mouths that opened too wide. "This is what they worship," Hassan said quietly, "or what they aspire to become." "That's insane," Raymond said. "Why would evolution favor that?" "Maybe it didn't," I said, staring at the sculptures. "Maybe they favored it themselves." The final month of the journey, sleep became difficult. I'd lie in my bunk, staring at the curved ceiling of my quarters, thinking about those sculptures, about the figures moving through the empty towns, about what we were going to find when we arrived. Captain Thorne held a briefing 2 weeks before arrival. We land, we observe, we don't make contact unless absolutely necessary. Our mission is scientific observation. We document, we analyze, we report back to Earth. We take no unnecessary risks. And if the inhabitants are hostile, Raymond asked. Then we leave, Thorne said simply. The compass rose can achieve orbit in under 4 minutes from a cold start. We don't take chances. Secundus appeared in our view screen on schedule, hanging in space like a blue-green jewel. It looked exactly like Earth. The same swirl of clouds, the same glint of oceans. For a moment, my heart surged with something like homesickness, even though I'd never left. Then we got closer, and the wrongness became apparent. The clouds moved in geometric patterns, perfect hexagons and squares drifting across the atmosphere. The oceans reflected light at angles that made my eyes hurt. And when we achieved orbit and began our first scanning pass, the instruments went haywire. Atmospheric composition is identical to Earth, Claire reported, frowning at her screens. But there's something else. Organic compounds in the air, complex proteins. I've never seen readings like this. Is it breathable? Thorne asked. Yes, but I'd recommend we wear respirators until we can run more tests. We selected our landing site carefully, a small coastal settlement that resembled something from the New England coast. Small town, maybe a few hundred buildings, situated on a natural harbor. From orbit, it looked peaceful, empty, but peaceful. The descent took 20 minutes. As we dropped through the atmosphere, I got my first real look at the landscape below. The wrongness hit me like a physical force. The forests were impossible. Trees grew in spirals, their branches interweaving into geometric patterns that hurt to look at. The fields between the forests moved, not with wind, but with something else. The grass itself seemed to pulse in waves. And then we saw the animals. A herd grazed in a meadow near the coast. From a distance, they looked like deer. As we descended, the details became clear. 6 legs each, heads that rotated completely backward to watch our ship descend. Eyes that faced the wrong direction, toward their tails instead of their faces. Jesus Christ, Raymond whispered. We landed in a clearing just outside the town. The ship's landing gear touched down on soil that felt too soft, too organic. Through the viewports, we could see the edge of the settlement. Small houses with peaked roofs, a church steeple rising above the other buildings, a main street running down to the harbor. It looked like home. It looked like any one of 1,000 small towns dotting the coasts of Earth. But it smelled wrong. When we opened the airlock, the smell hit us even through our respirators. Sweet, organic, like fruit rotting in the sun, but mixed with something else, something medical, formaldehyde and flowers. Stay together, Captain Thorne ordered. Stay alert. Hassan, you're monitoring for biological hazards. Claire, atmospheric analysis. Raymond and Cross, you're looking for geological and biological samples. We have 4 hours before we need to return for the night cycle. We walked toward the town in a tight group, our boots crunching on ground that felt wrong beneath our feet. Too springy, too alive. The first house we approached looked normal from a distance. White clapboard siding, shuttered windows, a small porch with a rocking chair. Then we got close enough to see the details. The wood was growing. The siding, the shingles, the porch boards, all of it pulsed with slow, rhythmic movement. Not breathing, exactly, but alive. The walls expanded and contracted by millimeters, as if the entire structure were a single living organism. "Don't touch anything," Hassan said unnecessarily. We were all frozen, staring. Raymond approached the door. It was closed but not locked. He pushed it open with the barrel of his equipment case, not willing to touch it with his hands. The interior was worse. Furniture made from bone, a dining table with legs carved from femurs, the surface a single piece of what looked like skull, polished smooth, chairs assembled from vertebrae and ribs, somehow articulated to allow sitting, a couch in the living room, covered in leather that still had paws, still had fine hairs. "They built their homes from the dead," Claire said, her voice hollow. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the photographs on the walls, family portraits in hand-carved frames, a couple on their wedding day, children playing in a yard, a group gathered around a dinner table. The people in the photographs looked almost human, almost, but their arms bent at one too many joints. Their smiles showed too many teeth, arranged in rows that went back too far into their mouths. Their eyes sat slightly off-center in their skulls, giving their faces an uncanny, predatory look. "They're human," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "They evolved here. This is what humans look like on Secundus." We explored 3 more houses. Each one was the same. Organic architecture, furniture made from bone and tissue, photographs showing humans who were almost, but not quite right. Captain Thorne made the decision to split up. Raymond and I would investigate the church, the largest building in the center of town. Hassan and Claire would examine what looked like a school on the northern edge of the settlement. Thorne and the others would scout the harbor and the boats docked there. "Radio check every 15 minutes, Thorne ordered. "Any sign of inhabitants, any sign of danger, you call immediately and we converge on the ship. Understood?" We all nodded. Raymond and I walked down the main street toward the church. The town was eerily preserved. No broken windows, no overgrown yards. Everything maintained as if the inhabitants had simply stepped out for the day and would return at any moment. "How long do you think it's been abandoned?" Raymond asked. "I don't think it is," I said. "I think they're here, watching." The church was larger than it had seemed from a distance, 3 stories tall, with a bell tower that rose another 20 feet above that. The doors were made from wood that still grew, the grains swirling in impossible patterns. Inside, the church was a cathedral of nightmares. The pews were made from ribs, hundreds of them, thousands, assembled into long benches that faced an altar at the front. The altar itself was carved from a single massive skull, human in basic shape, but 3 times too large, with eye sockets positioned in a triangular pattern. But the stained glass windows were what made me stop breathing. They depicted evolution, the same basic story taught in every school on Earth, the progression from single-celled organisms to fish, to amphibians, to mammals, to primates, to humans. But the humans were wrong. The final window showed the end point of human evolution. Not the upright, bipedal form we'd achieved on Earth. These humans had 4 arms sprouting from their torsos, 6 eyes arranged around their skulls, mouths that split their faces nearly in half, and they were posed in attitudes of triumph, arms raised toward a sun that had too many rays. "They think this is perfection," Raymond said, staring up at the window. "They think this is what humans are supposed to be." "Evolution on Earth favored efficiency," I said. 2 arms, 2 legs, 2 eyes. The minimum necessary for survival. But here it favored redundancy, Raymond finished. More limbs, more organs, more sensory inputs. In an environment where that provided an advantage, those traits would propagate. "But this isn't natural selection," I said, pointing at the windows. "Look at the surgical precision, the symmetry. This is modification. They did this to themselves." We found the stairs to the basement behind the altar. The door was open, darkness yawning below. Raymond pulled out a flashlight. We descended. The basement was a library. Books lined the walls from floor to ceiling, but they weren't made from paper. The pages were thin membranes, like dried skin, bound between covers made from carved bone. The text wasn't written in any alphabet I recognized. Instead, each page contained detailed anatomical drawings. I pulled one book from the shelf, carefully opening it. The drawings showed human figures in various stages of modification, surgical diagrams, before and after illustrations, a human with 2 arms becoming a human with 4, a face with 2 eyes gaining a 3rd, a 4th, a 5th. "It's a manual," I said. "Instructions for modification." "They're not just worshipping this," Raymond said, flipping through another book. "They're documenting it, teaching it. This is systematic." The radio on my belt crackled. Hassan's voice, tight with tension. "Cross, park, you need to see this. We're at the school. There's something here you need to see." We climbed out to the church basement and jogged through the empty streets. The school was a 2-story building with a playground out front. Swings made from braided sinew hung motionless in the still air. Hassan and Claire were standing in what looked like a classroom. Desks arranged in neat rows. A chalkboard at the front. Children's artwork pinned to the walls. The artwork showed children playing. Children with 4 arms. Children with eyes in the backs of their heads. Children with extra joints in their legs, allowing them to run in ways that defied human anatomy. "This is normal for them," Claire said. "This is what they teach their children to aspire to." Hassan had found something else. A cabinet at the back of the room, filled with medical instruments, scalpels, bone saws, surgical thread made from something that looked like spider silk, and diagrams showing the proper technique for adding an extra set of arms to a growing child. "They modify their children," Hassan said. "They start the process young, when the body is still developing. Make it easier to integrate the changes." The radio crackled again. "Captain Thorne," her voice urgent. "All teams, return to the ship immediately. We have movement. Multiple contacts approaching from the forest. They're coming toward the town." We ran. The streets blurred past as we sprinted back toward the landing site. Behind us, I could hear something. Not footsteps, something else. A sound like singing, but with too many voices in harmonies that shouldn't exist. We burst into the clearing where the compass rose stood. The rest of the crew was already there. Captain Thorne at the loading ramp, waving us in urgently. "Faster!" she shouted. I glanced back as we ran. The edge of the forest was moving, figures emerging from between the spiral trees. From a distance, they looked human, walking upright, arms swinging at their sides. Then they got closer, and I saw the truth. They had been human once. Maybe they still were, technically, but they'd been changed, modified, perfected by their own standards. Some had 4 arms, some had 6. Their faces had been surgically altered, additional eyes implanted in foreheads and temples. Their mouths had been widened, split almost to their ears. They moved with unnatural grace, their extra limbs giving them a flowing, almost beautiful gait. There were dozens of them, hundreds, all converging on the town, all converging on us. We made it to the ship with seconds to spare. Captain Thorne hit the door controls, and the loading ramp began to seal. Through the narrowing gap, I could see them approaching, not running, just walking, purposeful but not aggressive. The closest one, a woman, or what had been a woman, stopped at the edge of the clearing. She had 3 arms, the extra one sprouting from the center of her chest. Her eyes had been repositioned, one in the center of her forehead, the others on either side of her face in the normal positions. Her mouth stretched wider than should have been possible. She raised her hands, all 3 of them, in what might have been a gesture of welcome. "They're not attacking," Raymond said, staring at the monitors. "Then what do they want?" Claire asked. Hassan pulled up the external audio feed. The singing was clearer now. Not words, just harmonics. Multiple voices from each figure, somehow producing chords that one person should never be able to create. Captain Thorne's hand hovered over the launch controls. "We're not staying to find out. Everyone strap in. We're returning to orbit." "Wait," I said. "We came here to observe, to learn. We can't leave without understanding." "The hell we can't," Thorne snapped. "Look at them cross. Whatever happened here, whatever they've become, we're not equipped to handle it. We're scientists, not—" She didn't finish. One of the figures had approached the ship. A man, maybe 50 years old, by the gray in his hair. He only had 2 arms, but his face had been modified. His eyes were larger, positioned higher on his skull. His mouth was a horizontal slash that took up half his face. He placed his palm flat against the hull. Through the cameras, we could see him mouth something. No sound came through the reinforced metal, but the gesture was clear. He was asking us to come out. "No," Thorne said. "We're leaving." Everyone strapped in. The crew scrambled to the acceleration couches. Through the viewports, I could see more of them gathering. They didn't look angry. They looked curious, maybe even hopeful. The woman with 3 arms was drawing something in the dirt with a stick. She kept glancing at the ship, then back at her drawing, making sure we could see. "Captain," I said, "I think they're trying to communicate." "Not our problem right now," Thorne said. "Launch in 10 seconds." The engines powered up with a whine that became a roar. Through the viewport, I saw the modified humans step back, shielding their faces, all their eyes from the blast wash. We lifted off. As we climbed, I had one last clear view of the town. More of them were emerging from the buildings. Hundreds of them, maybe thousands. All looking up as we ascended, all with too many arms raised in farewell or supplication or something else entirely. The woman who'd been drawing was still visible. As we rose, I could make out what she'd sketched in the dirt. 2 stick figures, one normal, one with 4 arms, an equal sign between them, and next to it, a crude drawing of our ship. They wanted to show us, I said. They wanted us to see that they were human too, that they could help us become like them. Become like that, Claire said, horrified. Why would anyone? Because to them, it's not horror. Hassan said quietly. It's evolution. It's improvement. They think we're incomplete. We achieved orbit in 4 minutes, just as Captain Thorne had promised. Below us, Secundus rotated peacefully, the town shrinking to a dot on the coastline. From this distance, it looked like Earth. Beautiful, peaceful, home. But it wasn't home. It was something else. A mirror that reflected a version of humanity that should never have existed. Plot a course back to Earth, Captain Thorne ordered. 6 months, and we can put this nightmare behind us. We're really just leaving, Raymond asked. We didn't collect samples. We didn't establish communication. We barely learned anything. We learned enough, Thorne said. We learned that evolution on Secundus took a different path. We learned that intelligence combined with biological modification can produce horrors. We learned that sometimes the smart thing is to walk away. The quantum drive powered up. In 6 months, we'd be home. In 6 months, we could report everything we'd seen and let someone else decide what to do about Secundus. 6 months of faster-than-light travel. 6 months in the space between stars. 6 months breathing recycled air from Secundus. The first signs appeared 3 weeks into the return journey. Claire complained of shoulder pain. Hassan examined her in the medical bay, running scans and finding nothing. Probably just tension, he said, stress from the mission. But I saw the look in his eyes, the worry he was trying to hide. 2 weeks later, Raymond's teeth started feeling loose. He mentioned it casually at dinner, probing his gums with his tongue. Weird, he said. Feels like they're shifting. Hassan examined him. When Raymond opened his mouth, I saw Hassan's face go pale. What? Raymond asked. What is it? Your gums are restructuring, Hassan said. The bone underneath is changing shape. Changing shape how? Hassan didn't answer. He took dental x-rays. When he showed us the results, I felt something cold settle in my stomach. Raymond's jaw was widening. New bone growth was visible along the back, extending his dental arch, making room for more teeth. It's the air, Claire said. She'd been running analysis on the samples we'd collected, the atmospheric readings from our brief time on the surface. Those organic compounds I detected, they're not just proteins. They're evolutionary accelerants. Viruses, maybe, or something like them. They hijack DNA and introduce mutations, favorable mutations. Favorable, Raymond said, his voice rising. How is this favorable? On Secundus it would be, Hassan said quietly, redundant systems, additional capabilities. There, these changes would provide an advantage. Your body is trying to adapt to an environment you're no longer in. Week 7. Captain Thorne called a meeting in the observation deck. When she arrived, she moved stiffly, as if her joints hurt. I need everyone to understand something, she said. The changes aren't stopping. Hassan's been monitoring all of us. We're all showing signs of rapid evolutionary modification. She pulled up her sleeve. The skin of her forearm was slightly swollen, 2 distinct lumps visible beneath the surface. These appeared yesterday, she said. Hassan thinks they're the beginning of additional limb buds, like what happens in human embryonic development, but accelerated and in the wrong location. Oh God, Claire whispered. She pulled down the collar of her jumpsuit. A small bump was visible in the center of her forehead, right where the modified humans on Secundus had their third eyes. It's happening to all of us, Hassan said. The atmospheric exposure was brief, but it was enough. The compounds we breathed, they're rewriting our DNA, slowly but inevitably. Can you stop it? Raymond asked. Suppress it somehow. I've tried everything, Hassan said. Antivirals, gene therapy, immunosuppressants. Nothing works. Whatever this is, it's too efficient, too perfect. It's like our own bodies want these changes. How long? Captain Thorne asked. Hassan looked away. By the time we reach Earth, the transformations will be advanced, maybe complete. The observation deck went silent. Through the viewport, the stars streamed past in impossible patterns, warped by our faster-than-light travel. We can't go home, I said. Can we? No, Thorne said. We can't risk contaminating Earth. If these compounds are infectious, if they could spread, then what do we do? Claire asked, touching the bump on her forehead with trembling fingers. We find somewhere else, Thorne said. An uninhabited moon, an asteroid. Somewhere we can survive but can't spread this. We send our data back to Earth, but we never return. You're talking about permanent exile, Raymond said. I'm talking about preventing a catastrophe, Thorne replied. What happened on Secundus? Humans modifying themselves into those things. Imagine that happening on Earth. Imagine if everyone started believing that more limbs, more eyes, more everything was improvement. Imagine the chaos. Week 12. The changes accelerated. Hassan called me to the medical bay in the middle of the night cycle. When I arrived, he was sitting on the examination table, his shirt off. 2 small arms had emerged from his shoulder blades. Tiny, infantile, but unmistakably arms, complete with hands, with fingers. They moved when he breathed, reaching weakly at the air. It's trying to give us wings, he said, his voice dead. Or maybe just extra arms. I don't know anymore. I looked at my own reflection in the medical bay's mirror. My face looked normal. But when I opened my mouth wide, I could see it. The back of my throat was developing additional structures. My jaw felt tight, as if the bones wanted to spread. Claire's third eye was nearly complete. It sat in the center of her forehead, still sealed beneath a thin layer of skin. But we could see it moving underneath, tracking motion, seeing. Raymond's jaw had widened significantly. When he spoke, his words were slurred, his mouth too large for normal human speech patterns. Captain Thorne's spine was extending, a small tail visible at the base of her back. We were becoming like them, like the modified humans of Secundus. We need to make a decision, Hassan said. We're 2 months from Earth. If we're going to divert, we need to do it now. The crew meeting was the hardest thing I've ever participated in. Half the crew wanted to risk returning to Earth, to seek help, to trust that our scientists could find a cure. The other half understood the truth. We were contagious nightmares, and bringing ourselves home would be the end of everything. Captain Thorne put it to a vote. It was close, 5-5. As mission commander, the final decision fell to her. "We divert," she said. "Hassan, plot a course to the nearest uninhabited system. We'll find a moon, establish a base, and live out whatever time we have left. Maybe the changes will stabilize. Maybe we'll adapt. Maybe we'll become something new." "And if we don't?" Claire asked. Her voice sounded strange, distorted by the changes happening to her throat. "Then we die somewhere where we can't hurt anyone else," Thorne said simply. "We found a moon orbiting a gas giant 3 weeks later. It was small, barely large enough for its own gravity, but it had a thin atmosphere and ice beneath the surface. We could survive there, for a while at least. The landing was rough. Our bodies were changing too rapidly, making fine motor control difficult. Captain Thorne had to use her newly emerging tail for balance as she piloted us down. We set up base camp using components from the compass rose, shelters made from the ship's panels, life support systems extracted from the core. We'd survive, but we'd never leave. The changes continued. By month 5, we barely looked human anymore. Hassan's wing arms had grown massive now, covered in skin that might someday become flight capable. Claire's third eye had opened, seeing in spectrums we couldn't imagine. Raymond's mouth had split almost to his ears, his jaw capable of opening wide enough to fit a basketball inside. Captain Thorne's tail was fully developed, prehensile, capable of grasping objects. And me, I had started growing additional limbs under my arms, small arms with tiny hands. They were weak, useless, but they were there, and they were growing. We sent daily reports back to Earth, video logs showing our transformation, data about the atmospheric compounds, warnings about Secundus. "Don't come for us," I said into the camera. "Don't send a rescue mission. Don't go to Secundus. Evolution there follows different rules, cruel rules, rules that make redundancy and complexity virtues rather than efficiency." I paused, looking at my reflection in the camera lens. My face was still mostly human, but my eyes had started to migrate, slowly shifting toward the sides of my skull. "We discovered a second Earth," I continued, "and we learned that we won the lottery the first time. Evolution on our Earth favored efficiency. Evolution on Secundus favors horror." I was about to sign off when Hassan burst into the shelter. "They're here," he gasped, his wing arms spread wide. "Ships, in orbit. They followed us." We gathered outside, looking up at the thin atmosphere of our moon. Through the haze, we could see them. Ships in orbit, dozens of them. Not human design, organic looking, grown rather than built. They were from Secundus. They'd followed us across 40 light years, across 6 months of faster-than-light travel. They'd followed us here. "Why?" Claire asked, her 3 eyes all wide with fear. Hassan pointed at the view screen he'd brought outside. It was receiving a transmission, an image, a crude drawing like the one the woman had made in the dirt. A human figure, a modified human figure, an equal sign, and next to it, a picture of our ship, our moon, our base. "They've come to help," Raymond said, his too wide mouth twisting into something that might have been a smile or might have been a scream. "They've come to help us complete our transformation." The ships began descending, one by one, dropping through our thin atmosphere, landing around our base in a perfect circle. The airlocks opened. They emerged, the modified humans of Secundus, come to welcome us to our new evolution, come to help us become perfect. Captain Thorne's hand found mine. Her grip was strong, her tail coiling around her leg in agitation. "What do we do?" she asked. I looked at the approaching figures. Some had 4 arms, some had 6. All had eyes that watched us from impossible angles. All had mouths that smiled with too many teeth. They thought they were saving us, improving us, helping us achieve our full potential. I looked down at the small arms growing beneath my normal ones, at Hassan's wings, at Claire's 3 eyes, at Raymond's jaw. "I don't know," I said. The first of them reached our perimeter. She looked familiar, the woman from the town, the one with 3 arms. She'd traveled 40 light years to find us, to help us. She opened her too wide mouth and sang. That same impossible harmony, multiple voices from one throat. And from somewhere inside me, somewhere in the parts that were changing, I felt the urge to sing back. We never sent another transmission to Earth. I don't know if they sent a rescue mission. I don't know if they heeded our warnings about Secundus. I don't know if humanity learned anything from our mistake. All I know is that we're here, on this moon, changing, and we're not alone anymore. The people of Secundus brought equipment, surgical tools, their medical knowledge. They're eager to help, so eager. Sometimes, late in the night cycle, I can see our moon from the surface of the gas giant we orbit. A small dot, insignificant, but growing, because they keep coming. More ships from Secundus, more of the modified, and they're building, expanding, creating a colony, a staging ground maybe. I try not to think about what comes next, about whether they have plans for Earth, about whether the atmospheric compounds that changed us could be weaponized, spread, about whether humanity's next evolutionary step will be chosen for them. I look at my extra arms, 4 of them now, arranged in symmetrical pairs down my torso. I look at my face in the mirror, at my eyes that have migrated to give me nearly 360-degree vision, and my mouth that can open wide enough to swallow things whole. And I try to remember what it felt like to be human before we discovered we weren't the only version that evolution could create, before we learned that sometimes the mirror shows us things we were never meant to see,